Good evening. Before we get really started into this, because it's going to be a long night for all of us, I'd like to remind you that we're trying to have social distancing. So if you are not with your family, would you please separate yourself just a little bit so we can maintain that for us? And also, if you need a mask, we've got them up here because we'd like for you to wear a mask if you're capable. And if you have health issues, we're not going to require that, but we'd really like for you to try to do that. So if you would give us a moment of silence, we'll get ready to get into our pledge in about a minute. But let's have a moment of silence for just a minute. Thank you. I'd like everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we go to our first item on the agenda, I've got a statement that I need to get off my chest. And this is a tough one for me because some things, no matter what you say, is going to be right or wrong. So I'm just going to read what was written with me and for me and together, and I hope you understand. Over the last couple of months, my fellow supervisors and I have received numerous questions and comments regarding whether or not the Confederate monument located on Warren County Courthouse lawn should be relocated. We understand this is a very important issue to a large portion of our constituents and can also be emotional and a decisive issue. We're finding that out already. Therefore, it is important to us as your representatives to understand where the majority of our community stands. For that reason, on August 4th, 2020, the Board of Supervisors voted to submit a petition to the Warren County Circuit Court requesting that the judge enter an order setting a referendum regarding the possible relocation of the Confederate monument. That order has been entered, and on November 3rd, 2020, the citizens of Warren County will have an opportunity to vote on the question: should the Confederate monument located on Warren County Courthouse lawn be relocated? This will allow every voting citizen of Warren County who is eligible to vote a voice and to voice their opinion on this important issue. This also means that no action will be taken by this board regarding the Confederate monument until we receive the results of this advisory referendum. We look forward to reviewing and receiving the results and understanding the community's stance as a whole. Additionally, I wish to address another issue regarding meetings. This board has strived to be accessible and attentive to all of our constituents. For this reason, our rules regarding time limits during meetings has been relaxed. Unfortunately, we have found that our failure to adhere to these rules, along with the volume of work that this board needs to get done, has caused our nightly meetings to regularly run until 11:30 or later, and once even past midnight. And our last 9 a.m. meeting did not end until 5 p.m. that same day. Therefore, beginning today, I, as the chairman, will ensure the rules outlined in our meeting policies and procedures are adhered to during our meetings. We have 2 public comment periods, a 45-minute period set aside to hear public comments on items that are on the agenda, a 15-minute period set aside to hear any public comment. We also received public comments during certain public hearings. The agenda public presentation comment period is limited to 45 minutes. Such time is divided equally among the number of speakers who have signed up, with a maximum of 3 minutes for any one speaker. Any time left over is offered to any member of the audience wishing to speak, with a 3-minute maximum per speaker. The same rules will apply at the public comment period, except that the period is limited to 15 minutes. Mr. Daly will set a timer when you begin to speak. You will hear a ding once your time is up. And I ask you immediately conclude and step away from the podium so the next person may approach the podium. The board believes this will allow everyone to voice their opinions and concerns in a timely and considerate manner. Additionally, we ask that all comments be addressed to the board, not to the audience. And the respectfulness of your fellow speakers, we ask that you talk to the board. We will no longer allow applause, booing, or other audible disruptions during the proceedings. Lastly, the personal attacks of any kind will not be tolerated. Thank you for paying attention and for getting involved. And I personally thank each and every one of you for helping the board promote a culture of participation and respect while reorganizing that business which must be completed at all of these meetings. If you wish to see a copy of our meeting policies and procedures that we did approve at the first of the year, you are welcome to ask Ms. Shiraki for a copy. I think that we've done a terrific job of getting back to the business of doing business with some of the right people. It's been hard, really hard. And it's hard for me to sit here and understand how decisive some of the things are that we having to deal with. Sometimes me personally, I just think it's a road, or, no offense to anyone, a statue, or a sign, or a flag. And I believe that we should be looking toward each other to try to figure out how we can do it together. Not separately. We as a board, I think, and I hope the board corrects me if I'm wrong, I believe that we should be talking with each other and communicating with each other more than we do. I don't want to solve everybody's problems. If we've got a shooting issue, talk to your neighbor. I'm not going to solve that for you. If I solve it, somebody's going to be ticked off. Learn to work some of these things out. And having said that, I'm ready to start the meeting. We have a quorum in the room, so we can do everything that we need to do tonight. First order on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no additions or deletions, I move that we accept the agenda.
Yeah, microphone.
If there's no addition or deletions, I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda has been accepted. Next is a public comment period for 45 minutes. And do we have anybody that has signed up?
Yes.
And this is for what is on the agenda.
Mr. Joe Andrews.
Good evening. Joe Andrews, 735 Mcguest Farm Lane, here in Front Royal. A little confusing this evening that we've got so many different topics and we're only going to speak during those issues. I got 3 minutes. I could probably rattle off everything I've got on my little brain in that period of time, but if I'm not going to be allowed to, I'll stick to just what's on the agenda. Coronavirus and the coronavirus relief. I don't quite understand what's going on with all that, but I'm going to give you my opinion of the coronavirus and the regulations that we're all having to go through. We're watching businesses shut down. Restaurants are closing up. Barber shops are hardly open. DMV is still not open. A lot of public services aren't there for us, the taxpayers. I look to you folks as our Board of Supervisors to send a word to Richmond. We want business open back up. I think we're going way overboard with all of this nonsense. I don't personally know anyone that has passed away from coronavirus. I have lost some friends to cancer, the flu, and other things, but coronavirus, no. That's all for the agenda topics. I'll be back for the others.
Mrs. Shiranki, has anyone else signed up?
Not for items on the agenda. There's no one else signed up.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. You're more than welcome to come up and speak. And we are talking about something on the agenda, correct?
That is not the subject of a public hearing.
It's not the subject of a public hearing.
Is it on the agenda?
Technically, yes. It's about Linden Heights Sanitary District.
Okay. That's a public hearing thing, I believe, isn't it?
It's not about the actual law enforcement deal. It's about just I surveyed the residents.
Come on up and talk. You got a couple of minutes, please. I don't want to confuse anybody at all. I apologize.
I'm so sorry. I was a little confused because I thought that it was just for general comments.
That actually happens in the last 15 minutes. And you're more than welcome to speak then if you want, but if it's not on the agenda,
I didn't
It would be
expect
a
all
good
these
thing.
people here, so if I'm right here, I'm ready to go, if you don't mind. My name is
Does-
Jeannie Anderson, and I live
does
at...
excuse me, does anybody else have a problem with her speaking? Thank you. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Thank you. My name is Jeannie Anderson, and I live at 7T Court in Linden. Good evening, everyone. I randomly surveyed my Linden Heights neighborhood and asked a few questions about what they wanted the future of their neighborhood to look like. I asked questions like, would you support a ban on four-wheelers or dirt bikes? Would you support a ban on guns, such as shooting? I also asked about the Rural Addition program. The overwhelming majority of the sample did not support further restrictions on our homeowners. Most made a point to mention they support the fewest restrictions as possible, and they did not want the neighborhood to change. The majority were pleased with the way things are, and they could not see any problems. Some responded regarding the ATVs that they like the kids who ride them because they are outside and they watch the neighborhood. Some adults are just giving their children something to do in exchange for a few moments of sanity. Some said they wish they wouldn't tear up the roads, but otherwise were happy and just wanted the riders to know and be safe. In response to shooting, many seem to indicate that the shots they hear are not frequent or bothersome, that most of our lots are against a preserve, and they expect that people would like to shoot there. Besides freedoms that neighbors felt were important to have, property values, speeding, and increased traffic were a concern. Restrictions and increased fees will limit potential buyers and home values. Widening and paving roads invited faster travel, making it more dangerous. Many felt that the bumpy gravel roads help keep people away, and they like that. Others claim that there is much unnecessary traffic since the county comes in on a regular basis, snooping around, they said. I want to remind the board that Linden Heights residents do not want their fees increased, and many mentioned they would not support the Rural Addition program if it increased their fees. Others did not support the idea of losing part of their yards due to widening roads. The HOA board also submitted a letter in writing that Linden Heights residents have never supported the idea of using county funds to cover any costs and then having to pay them back. Several residents made a point to say that they never wanted to become a sanitary district, but were at a loss for collection power and oversight of the funding for much-needed maintenance purposes. not for further restrictions or any other services. My purpose here is to remind you that each subdivision is unique in character, that residents have lived there for 20 years or more. Others who moved in recently claim they moved there specifically because they like it the way that it is. Thank you very much.
Jean Ann, did she give something to you?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it is some papers with listings of the property tax IDs and differing columns, barring ATVs, band dirt bikes, band guns, advisory board, rural edition, other, et cetera.
Thank you. I really appreciate you doing that for us.
I'm sorry, and I had this great idea. I was going to complete, like, going to 90 homes, then I realized that it was impossible for me, which is why I'm no longer on the board. So there's about 15 people that I spoke with personally and at length, and randomly that I've never met before or talked to.
I'm glad you brought that in for us. Is there anyone else that would care to speak on anything on the agenda? Thank you. Next on our agenda is a report from Taryn Logan on the COVID-19 expenditures for Warren County.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. At your desk, you have a detailed report for all COVID-related expenses I have received so far through the end of July. I have added the library and the Northwestern Community Services expenses that I've received. And again, this is for the reimbursement through FEMA's grant program for a 75% cost share. The total cost right now is $244,930.43 that we have, the departments that you have on your spreadsheet have spent towards the COVID disaster. So if you have any questions, please let me know. And as always, you're welcome to stop by my office anytime and review the detailed receipts.
And I apologize, but this is through how long? I mean, we just got this today, so I hadn't read everything on it.
Through the end of July.
Okay.
So I'm still really through about today.
I'm sorry?
It's really through about today. I've received social services today, and I haven't added that in, but I'm getting receipts weekly. So.
Good. Does anyone have any questions for Taryn? Thank you, Ms. Logan. Appreciate it. Next on our agenda is the report from the board members. I guess I'll start on that. I visited about 14 different citizens this week. Lots of topics on lots of people's minds. Last Saturday, I was at the board meeting at the Shenandoah Farms group, and I've just been everywhere that I can be during this trying time. So that saying, if you need me, holler. I'm always available. My number's on the website. I'm happy to talk with anybody.
Basically, Mr. May, Dr. Daly, and I did a tour of our parks and recs last Wednesday, I think it was.
Last Wednesday, yes.
And, we have beautiful parks and recs, that is for certain, and very appreciative of them. I would like to make a plea to the public to try to do a little better job in not speaking to anybody individual, but just a broad statement to the whole county of when we take our trash to the landfill, if we could do a better job of securing that, because we have a beautiful community, especially the south end of the county, and I'm very proud of the whole county, but especially my end. And it's just disheartening, as Mr. Radigan will tell you, as a South River resident. He's made many videos of the debris along the road, and a lot of it is just where, in our haste to hurry up and do our daily life and throw that trash on the back of our pickup truck or in a pull trailer behind us, we think that it's going to stay on there, and hitting those bumps or whatever, it doesn't always stay on there. And it ends up everywhere. And not only is it unsightly, but it can make a traffic hazard as well. So, myself included, I think we all just need to take that extra minute and make sure that we secure that load so that we keep our place a beautiful place for ourselves and for the people that come here. Tourism is a lot of our revenue, and you know, we need to take pride in it. So I just wanted to get that out there as a plea for us all to do a little better with that. So thank you.
I'll just report that the things are quiet and good in the Fork District.
That's so simple, it's pitiful. Thank you, sir. The Interim County Administrator, Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have a copy of the monthly report, but the important news comes from Beth Revis, our Interim Social Services Director.
Hi,
Good
Beth.
evening. Hi, how are you? Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. I have two programs I'd like to talk to you about. This week, we got messages from the state that there is a rent and mortgage relief program. It's funded by the state. It's to help people with back rent that experience some kind of loss of income during the COVID crisis. So if you were laid off, or if your business closed, if you had a reduction of hours, if you had to stay home to care for children because you didn't have child care, if you lost child or spousal support, if you haven't been able to work, missed hours, if you've been able to find work, or if you're too sick or too vulnerable to go out in the public and work, those people would be eligible for this program. The income limits for this program are much higher than the ones that I administer through social services. And it's very easy to apply. It's a number that you call. I have flyers I'll be glad to give to anyone who's interested. You call, they screen you over the phone, and they mail you an application. You complete it. The good thing about this program, it helps both the tenant and the landlord. We have a lot of landlords who are in a moratorium against evictions, and a lot of those landlords need their money too to survive and to pay their bills. So I like this program. The money goes directly to the landlord. It's a good program. And according to what we've heard, it's being underutilized. About 20% of the $2 million has not been used. So I spent all day Saturday taking the flyers to businesses that I thought had been impacted and trying to get the word out on that program. So that's one. And if you read the Royal Examiner this morning, you saw the story about the $1 million grant we had for coming to this county for substance abuse. Well, Warren, Page, and Shenandoah. And yesterday, before I even knew about this grant, I had convened a group that included the state police, drug task force, the sheriff's office, my office, the schools, and several other community entities to try to talk about an issue that's really impacting the community right now, which is a fentanyl crisis. So this grant comes at the most opportune time to try to deal with this crisis. We've had lots of teenagers overdose. We've had deaths in the community, and it's a growing problem, and it's a very critical problem, and we need to address it very quickly. So we can use some of these funds. We partner with the school to get education in the curriculum so that kids know what they're getting when they buy. They may think they're getting something, and they're getting something totally different and lethal. So it was a good time to have that meeting, and it's a perfect time to use those funds to save the kids in this county. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
On the rent and mortgage
Yes, sir.
abatement program, if you have a couple of flyers, could you leave them with us?
Sure, I will.
Okay.
They may be
And
in my car, but
Is there the limits that they're trying to adhere to? Are we talking about because of the COVID, they've got behind
Right.
and could be for 2 or 3 months.
It can go back to April.
Okay, it can go back to April. Okay,
And it's a one-time, but if you're still struggling, you can reapply, and they'll consider those as they can until the money runs out.
okay. What if we're coming into a time where things have changed? And we could be coming into a time to where there are people that don't know that they're in trouble. And they're going to be in trouble in October.
Yes.
They're up with their mortgage payment, they're up with their rent, but October, they had no money left. Are those people going to be helped as well, or do they have to get behind before they can ever be helped?
It doesn't actually say that you have to be in arrears, so if you can demonstrate a need and you can show documentation from your landlord that your rent is due and you're unable to pay it, I believe that those applications would be considered also. You know, I too have been worried about the people that have been living on their savings and are going to come to a point where it's gone and things haven't improved for them. So I think this program is going to be a big help to those people.
Okay.
Okay,
Any other questions?
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I want to remind the board that we are working on, with the school board, on the refinancing of our school bonds because we can get a better interest rate. And there will be a meeting September the 2nd at 5 o'clock, a joint meeting with the school board for the purpose of having a presentation from Davenport and Associates on that matter. And this will come up later on the agenda. Remind you that you have the draft proposals for the Broadband Committee and the Railroad Committee, and you need to get us back your comments, how you want to revise those. And those are just straw mans for you to work on, but we want to get something that you can start on in early September. Remind you regarding the CARES Act that we are working with the Chamber of Commerce on our business loans, and that the Chamber has a committee working to review those loans. And the EDA has selected Mr. Wolf as their member and Mr. Brown as their alternate. And the board needs to appoint, elect, select, however you want to do it. Somebody has to be the board representative, and just notify the chamber who would like to do that. And I thank you very much.
Yeah, is that someone, are you talking about somebody on the board?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
sir. One board member, please. Mr. Vice Mayor Seelock is the town representative.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. Interim County Attorney?
I have no report.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Can we go ahead and list all of them, or should we do them individually?
Unless there are any amendments that you would like, you are more than welcome to list them all together in one motion.
Do we have any problems with any of the minutes?
No, sir. Mrs. Shiraki and I spoke, and we've already fixed the one, and I would approve the minutes as they are. I'd make a motion to approve the minutes.
I was second.
Any additional discussion? Minutes are approved.
Need to have a vote, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, I just wanted to approve them. Come on. Could we get a vote? Mrs. Shiraki, a roll call, please.
Mr. Mabe?
Yes.
Ms. Colors?
Aye.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Next on our agenda is the appropriations and transfers. Do we have any motion on those, or any questions or concerns?
I move that we accept the appropriations and transfers.
Second.
Could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Colors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye. Those are approved. The approval of the accounts.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the accounts as presented.
Is there a
Second.
second? Could we get a roll call, please, Ms. Shiraki?
Mr. Chairman,
Aye.
Ms. Colors,
Aye,
Mr. Fox.
Aye.
and it's 7:30.
And it's 7:30. At 7:30 every evening, or every meeting that we have, it is now open for public comment.
No public hearings.
Oh, excuse me, public hearings, so we'll start with those. Okay, where are we? First item on our public hearing is the lease of county-owned property located at 136 Hildridge Street. Mrs. Rosser?
Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. Warren County owns property located at 136 Hillage Street, Front Royal. This property does include the space that was formerly used as Eddie's Laundromat on the first floor, along with 2 apartments on the second floor. The most recent tenant of apartment 2 has vacated the apartment, and the county has advertised to both the public and staff. County employee Ray Freeman was the first person to express interest in leasing the property. A draft lease has been prepared by Assistant County Attorney Caitlin Jordan, and Mr. Freeman is agreeable with the terms of that lease. The lease is for a 1-year term with a monthly rent of $725 with water and sewer included. Warren County Code does require that the county hold a public hearing after proper advertisement once in a local paper for any lease of county-owned property. This public hearing has been properly advertised, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have a motion?
We understand that this was advertised for the general public. Is that correct?
Yes, it was in the paper for the general public, and then shortly after that, we emailed all county staff and school staff as well.
But then it was offered to the employees of the county.
That's correct.
And how was that advertised for the employees of the county, if I may?
Our human resource manager, Jody Safel, emailed all county staff, and she also forwarded it to, I believe, Melody Shepherd with the school system, and it was sent out to their staff as well.
Okay, so it was well covered with all the employees knew about it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a motion?
I think we need to open it up for a public hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Let's see. The public hearing for hearing for the lease on the county-owned property located at 136 Hildred Street is hereby open. Is there anyone that would like to speak again on it?
No one has signed up, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Does the board have any additional questions or concerns? If there is no one else that would like to speak, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak at all? This public hearing is now closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Supervisors authorize the county administrator to execute the proposed lease with Ray Freeman for county-owned property at 136 Hillage Street, Front Royal.
Second.
Any questions or concerns at all?
Vote.
Could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Chairman,
Aye.
Ms. Colors,
Aye.
Mr. Fox.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item number 2 on the public hearing is the public hearing for the appropriations of the second round funding through the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security, the CARES Act, in the amount of $3,504,154. Mr. Munch?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Last week, we received the $3,504,154 from the federal government. Was round 2 of the CARES Act. According to the Code of Virginia, any amendments to our budget that exceed 1% of the expenditures of the already approved budget must go through a public hearing process. We advertised for the public hearing this evening for the appropriate 7 days, and I would request that we go ahead and move into that public hearing.
Does the board have any questions or concerns at all for the staff?
And I would just mention, this is just the question of appropriation or not appropriation. This is not a discussion about the allocation of the funds.
Yes, sir. Could we get a motion on that, please?
We have to
Public
open it.
No, we
hearing.
don't have to. Say again?
We have to open it.
Okay.
Public hearing.
The public hearing is now open. Mrs. Shirashi, has anyone signed up?
No, Mr. Chairman.
If there is no one in the audience that would like to speak, consider this final call.
We have one.
We have one?
Mr.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Gabbert, 1221 Valley View Drive. I brought up before, a couple of weeks ago, the town received money from the county for the COVID relief. I understand that the town had not hired anyone that they were going to put the money out, the expenses. So they were going to put $100,000 into the general fund, town fund. And I questioned whether that was legal, that they could take $100,000 out of the COVID money and put it into a general fund. And I was just wondering if any one of you had checked that out, or?
Mr. Farrell, do you have an answer or any comment, please?
Mr. Chairman, the town has indicated to me that that $100,000 would go towards public safety salary, much like we are considering doing that ourselves, thereby putting it into the fund, but under public safety.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
The interim town manager stated that $100,000 was being put into the general fund because they didn't know how much that they were going to be charged to distribute these funds. And that was the reason from the town manager why these funds were put into the general fund, $100,000. And now we get another answer. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? This public hearing is now closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Supervisors amend the four-year 2021 budget and appropriate an additional $3,504,154 of CARES Act funding pursuant to 15.2-2507 of the Code of Virginia.
Second.
Could we get a roll call, please, Mrs. Shiraki?
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda for the public hearing is a public hearing regarding mending and reordinating Section 12-1, I believe it's 1080 of the Public Town Code to increase the assessed sum for each criminal and traffic case where the defendant is convicted of violating a county ordinance or state statute of $20. Caitlin?
Good evening. The Virginia Code allows localities to enact ordinances that assess funds for each case a defendant is convicted of violating a state statute or county ordinance. The Virginia Code had limited the sum to no more than $10, but beginning July 1st, 2020, the legislature increase that amount to $20. Currently, our code section reflects the $10 minimum. The request before the board tonight is that the ordinance be amended to increase the sum to $20 beginning September 1st, 2020. This increase will help funding for courthouse security. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions for the staff? This public hearing is now open. Mrs. Shirashki, has anyone signed up?
No, Mr. Chairman.
If there's no one signed up, is there anyone that would like to speak on this? Since no one has spoken, this public hearing is now closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
I move the Board of Supervisors amend and reordain Section 12.1 of the Warren County Code to increase the assessed sum to $20 for each criminal and traffic case where the defendant is convicted of violating a county ordinance or state statute.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next on the agenda is for public hearing is the ordinance to amend and reordain Section 172-2 of the Warren County Code, designated private roads in the Linden Heights subdivision as highways for law enforcement purposes. Caitlin Jordan, please.
When the Board of Supervisors in 1980 enacted Warren County Code Section 172-2, it designated all platted roads and streets in Shenandoah Farm subdivision as highways for law enforcement purposes. However, since that time, there have been properties that have split away from Shenandoah Farms, namely properties that are found on Warren County Tax Map 23C. Currently, our code section describes Shenandoah Farm subdivision as various tax maps, including tax map 23C. But in light of the changes of the split between, the creation of the Linden Heights subdivision, the request before the board tonight is that the ordinance be amended to reflect these changes, that the language describing Shenandoah Farm subdivision be changed to reflect the parts of tax map 23C that's of the properties that still remain in Shenandoah Farms, and that Linden Heights be added specifically to the ordinance, and to designate the streets found in that subdivision. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So as we understand it, Linden Heights has separated from Shenandoah Farms, and they're a separate entity completely. Is that what?
Yes, in 1992, there was an agreement signed between the Linden Heights Homeowners Association and the property owners of Shenandoah Farms, completely removing those properties found on sheets 2 and 4 of tax map 23C, and it is its own subdivision and completely separate from Shenandoah Farms. So the ordinance should reflect that.
Okay. That's all I have, Chairman.
Now, does this simply means that the sheriff's department can actually go on their streets without any problem? Am I reading that right?
It will clarify enforcement for the residents of Linden Heights, as well as Shenandoah Farms, as well as for law enforcement.
Okay, that's all I have.
So if someone in Linden Heights calls because of a speeder or anything like that, at this point, without this, law enforcement can't go and address that issue. With the ordinance, they can?
It's not that law enforcement can't go to enforce that issue. The problem is when you actually try to enforce it in court. Because as of right now, it's unclear, because all of the properties on tax map 23C are labeled in the ordinance as Shenandoah Farm subdivision. It needs to be clarified that Linden Heights is also included. Currently, they are included, but the ordinance is not clear in that because of the changes that have happened since 1980.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. This public hearing is now open. Mrs. Shiraki, has anyone signed up?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Joe Andrews?
Yes.
Me again, Walt. Joe Andrews, 735 Mcguest Farm Lane. I think this is clearly government overreach. I've spoke to a couple people that live in this subdivision. They're not fans of this. What this basically says is that law enforcement can come there and patrol without being called. That was your question. Law enforcement can go anywhere as long as they've got a phone call. So if a neighbor doesn't like what you're doing or thinks that you're breaking the law enforcement can still go to this area. What this is changing is that now law enforcement can go there without being called. And I don't think anyone wants that.
Is that accurate? I mean, not doubting you, but to get the lawyer here. Yeah, I did.
Oh, sorry, thank you. I would disagree that it's saying law enforcement can, with this ordinance, law enforcement can just now go in and patrol. What this says is that law enforcement can treat, if, let's say if somebody is speeding down the road, law enforcement can enforce the speed limit in these roads. It's not an open ticket to where now law enforcement can now come into and patrol. I would have to ask law enforcement what their protocols are, but I believe there's a big distinction to be made, that this is simply saying that law enforcement can treat the roads within Linden Heights as highways for the purposes of law enforcement.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Yes, Miss Jeannie Anderson is signed up.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you for letting me speak earlier today, so I don't have to stay here all night. Yes, I didn't understand what was taking place tonight, so I came, I cut my survey of the neighborhood short, because I was like, you know, this isn't feasible for me, I have small children. But I spoke to a few people about this in particular, and I think first off, I want to say that I want to question the nature of this request. It is not outlined in the application papers, which I find out of the ordinary, because usually the Planning Commission and so forth is very thorough in identifying why they're bringing up changes to the community. And so the questions that I have are, what benefit does it provide to the community, which you addressed some of those things. And I want to know, why is it being brought up tonight? What are some of the examples of what it would look like? What are the negative impacts? So you have no one to provide any negative impacts of that sort of thing. I think Joe Andrews kind of touched on it, just saying that it's government overreach. You said that it's not clear because of the changes that took place. Those changes took place because the residents did not want to be part of Shenandoah Farms, and there's a very big divide as to why they did not want to be part of Shenandoah Farms. There's a dispute on Old Linden Road as to where that divide should be, or why it should be there in the first place. I think that, you know, there's definitely an issue with speeding, especially on Old Linden Road. It seems that Shenandoah Farms residents are coming and cutting across, or even people that don't live anywhere nearby, are cutting across from Tomahawk area, which is Shenandoah Farms, through Old Linden to High Top. And that disturbs the residents there. Some of them have small children. It's dangerous. I think there was a high-speed chase through there at one point. But overall, and then I also spoke with a law enforcement resident there. We actually have several law enforcement who reside in our neighborhood. And this one particular gentleman, I asked to come to speak tonight, but most people don't, unfortunately, want to come and speak because they feel like what they say doesn't matter, and you guys are gonna do whatever it is that you're gonna do because that's what's in the plan and that's what you've been counting on for 40 years. But he said that it may also have to do with the rural addition program itself, that you can't give over the give a road over to the state, maybe if it's not in designated for law enforcement purposes. That might be a stipulation in the project. I don't know. I saw Sheriff Mark Butler walking around here. Maybe he could come and speak. It would be, since it's regarding law enforcement, I think that, you know, we should have some input from him. And I was unable to get anyone else from my neighborhood to come to speak that I know of. And I actually didn't know about this when I started surveying my neighborhood. I began surveying my neighborhood because I had heard that, you know, some attorneys were involved and they were gonna come and ban guns, and I saw that Dungleden was being added, and I thought, well, why don't you guys just take care of the whole problem and put it in like a noise ordinance or something countywide, instead of taking the freedoms away from others who, you know, maybe have a very stressful workload, and that's how they like to relieve their stress, is just some target practice at the end of the day on their day off. There's nothing wrong with it. So thank you. I don't know what else to say, and I'm sorry if I was kind of loud earlier. I'm not very good at this. I'm very new to it, and I appreciate your humility.
We're in the same boat.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And please, I don't want anyone to think that we don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm more than willing to hear what anyone has to say. We may not agree, but I'm going to listen to what you have to say.
You know, I think there is also some issues coming here too, because if you don't bring it through the county, through the correct channels, then maybe people get in trouble or something, and I don't know all about that, but, you know, I don't know, and I don't think other people know. They're just here to say, like Mr. Gabbert said, well, why is there $100,000 there? Well, maybe someone could explain it to him. I don't know.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? You're more than welcome. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Nancy Wynn. I'm at 146 Lookout Point Way, Linden, Virginia. And I wasn't actually going to speak on this topic, but this whole state road police thing, listen, I live in Shenandoah Farms. You call law enforcement and they don't show up. And they can come anytime they want. So we never see law enforcement. Even the law enforcement that live in our community, when they see an ATV and they know what's wrong, they don't stop it. So I don't think having law enforcement have permission is going to change anything for Linden Heights, in my opinion. And the second thing is on the old Linden Road. You know, I do take that road quite a bit instead of going Tomahawk, just for different and change. I usually do the speed limit. I do about 20. I don't think if people speed on that road, they shouldn't, and people speed all over. Our community's grown. I don't know how to rectify that for them. You know, we just can't, we're a mountain community. Because when I first moved here, somebody tried to block, they put a big trench in Tomahawk. I think some of you might remember that. So we couldn't use the road. And I feel for people that live on Old Linden or any road where people speed and are disrespectful. They shouldn't do that. And the other issue is about shooting. Like, people want to relieve their tension. I'm not going to be very popular with people with this one because your bullets have to go somewhere. And there's people that shoot in Linden Heights that shoot within a mile of my home. Now, and they shoot into a refuge area. Do they have permission to shoot there? The bullets have to go somewhere, and if they don't have a proper backdrop and it's not safe, you just can't recreational shoot. So I'm going to support, if you have less than 5 acres, it's not safe. And what gives anybody permission or the right to think that because they're having a stressful day, that they can get their little weapons out and just shoot, 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 and that's gonna be okay. What if somebody was walking in that refuge area? You have to think about those things. So that's all I wanted to say on that. I think there has to be some sensibility about people's, yes, I support the Second Amendment, I do, but I think people need to be wise where they shoot and in what type of neighborhoods that it's okay for them to shoot in.
Jean Ann, would you come up and if you want to say some more, so everybody can hear you?
I didn't want to like answer negatively towards her or anything, because I know that you said that in the beginning. I just want to say also that, people who are trained in weapons know how to stop their, ammo or whatever, and they, aren't necessarily shooting into the preserve. The preserve would just be like, additional room in case something were to happen. It just adds that extra layer, but they would have, berms shooting down into the ground, that sort of thing. And that's not anybody's business, unless something happens. But nothing's happened, for one. And also, there are things that you can do that I think have been brought up in the past that have to do with like education. And I don't mean, because I know that's kind of silly, people say, oh, well, you teach gun training or whatever in like out in the classroom or something with an NRA instructor. Some people say, well, that's just bizarre. Well, you can actually teach people about weapons safety in the classroom in a school setting. But we're not debating the gun ban issue right now. I brought it up because it seemed like there was an issue that was coming on board, and it's going on around the country and everything like that. And it has to do with law enforcement. If this guy's shooting and they call, and then it gives law enforcement, I mean, if they call, law enforcement can go check it out anyway, which the residents have some experience in that. And they say, well, I'm not recklessly shooting, which is already a law, that if you're found recklessly shooting a firearm, you can be criminally charged or whatever with that. So that's already a law. You're not allowed to do that. And they can come to your property and charge you with that if they find that's what you're doing. And like, it's established, they can call and they can come and check it out. But the cop, if the highway's, I don't know if the highway's designated, if then the cop can sit on the corner and wait for you to start shooting because it's your day off or something, and then come and bother you. And so I think that might be a concern too among residents. And they just don't want anything to change. They really like it there, and they like where they live, and they don't see any problems. It just has to do with the road maintenance. There was embezzlements prior to the sanitary district agreement, and then there were expense issues because it's very expensive for an outside contractor to come up there and maintain, and the county offered to keep those funds. So,
Yep.
sorry.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? One at a time. And could we get your name and address, please?
Noel Williams, 419 Chrysler Road, Front Royal, Virginia. Let's just be adults here. Don't speed, don't shoot, and we'll be fine. Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Please, come up. Your name and address, please.
Yeah, good evening. That's Kevin Schmidt, 1270 High Top Road. I had no intentions of speaking tonight. I'm here in support of some neighbors for some further issues down the line. But I just wanted to ask a question about the amendment. Is this amendment, it's tax code area 23C, directly for the property owners in Linden Heights, right? So that there's no affecting the sanitary districts in Shenandoah Farms or any other property owners?
Not that I'm aware of, Caitlin?
The only amendments proposed tonight are clarifying the properties on tax map 23 for Shenandoah Farm subdivision and Linden Heights. That is it.
So my suggestion would be constituents expect individual solutions for individual problems and complex solutions for complex problems. And we're talking about an amendment that affects two different sanitary districts and property owner groups, homeowner sex. So I think the amendment should come from one or the other. Shenandoah Farm should write specifically, not via their tax code, for their streets, whether or not they want to have, with all due respect, I love our folks at law enforcement. I think they do a great job here. But what we're talking about is speed traps. And so people in that community need to decide whether or not they want to be coming home from work and they want to see a cop waiting on the corner, you know, ready to issue a ticket. You know, if that's what you want in your community, that's fine. I'm not going to say how I feel either way. But again, individual solutions for individual problems and complex solutions for complex problems. All right? That's it.
Caitlin, we're still talking about Linden Heights, correct?
Yes.
I mean, we've went way around in our circle and we're going to stop this.
Yes, this is only to clarify Linden Heights. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this issue? If there is no one else that would like to speak, we consider this public hearing now closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
I have a question, if you will, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
sir.
The sheriffs and deputies, they're there to enforce only state and county law. Is that right? They typically don't enforce any individual homeowners association laws.
Correct. I believe it would only be state and county ordinances and statutes.
That's what I understood.
What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Supervisors amend and reordain Section 172-2 of the Warren County Code to designate the private roads and private streets located in Linden Heights subdivision as highways for law enforcement purposes.
Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
I'm kind of at an impasse here of, I'd almost like to have time to have more discussion and have a more clear, I don't think everybody is clear here on that this is how much power this gives the sheriff's department versus this gives them the ability, not necessarily to go there, but to, when they go there and there's a problem, that it stands up in the court versus not, they can't issue a ticket or anything if they don't have this. And maybe I'm off, and that's why I'd almost rather postpone the action until I have a more clear understanding so that I know I'm doing the best things for all parties.
So if I can, and certainly we can, postpone this to another meeting. I'll give you one real-world example, drunk driving. So if you're drunk driving in your driveway, well, that's not a crime. If you're drunk driving on a private street, also not a crime. If you're drunk driving on a highway in the Commonwealth, then that's a crime. So that's one thing that does. And, I'm not a criminal defense attorney or a prosecutor, but that's one real-world example of what this would do.
And that's what my question was. It's not necessarily giving them any more permission to go in there. It's just giving them the ability.
It's making some criminal laws applicable to these streets, the same way they would be to, North Commerce Avenue. And again, Mr. Daly wanted to chime in with a little bit of what I knew, but certainly if you have other questions about it, it's fine to defer it to another day.
Mr. Fox, would you like to withdraw your recommendation?
I withdraw, and then I'd like to table it.
Would you like to table this until a later date?
Yes.
September 15th-ish, somewhere in there?
So would you like to table this to a work session discussion?
Yes,
Or just table?
please.
Okay, so would you like the September 1st work session after the regular meeting, or the September 8th work session at 7 o'clock?
September 8th.
Okay.
And could I ask if there's any interested parties that attend to the work session, would that be permissible?
There you go.
Okay, very well.
I'll
So-
second that then.
Okay, very well.
Could I get a roll call, please?
Thank you.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Mabe?
Aye. The next item on the agenda is the ordinance to amend and ordain Section 177-3 of the Warren County Code, recreational shooting of firearms in Dungadin subdivision. Mr. Daly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Section 1773 of the county code provides for designated locations where shooting of firearms is prohibited. And you have a list of 11 subdivisions where shooting of firearms is prohibited. And you have a copy of the regulations concerning those firearms, and you also have a petition from 41, of the 62 lots of property owners in the subdivision requesting that this subdivision be added to designated locations where shooting of firearms is prohibited.
Questions? Does anyone on the board have questions? I know I do. Given that, I understand Dungadin because I considered actually buying a home there. And one of the things that did concern me was that it was, lots were relatively small for what you were trying to buy. And when I look at the size of the lot, not trying to take away anything from me being able to own or not own a gun, or shoot at leisure or not shoot at leisure, being safe or not being safe, I looked at it as a small lot, and if somebody was shooting there, I had a problem with that. That was the biggest problem that I had. I don't want to take rights away from anybody, but I want safety. I want safety above and beyond everything that we're talking about here today. So, Mr. Daly, do we feel, or does the people that are actually asking for this in Dungadin, do they feel that it's become so heavily populated that this is not a Second Amendment thing, it's a safety thing?
The petition, sir, says it is our wish to have the subdivision added to the list of subdivisions in Warren County Code 177-3 sub A that are so heavily populated as to make the outdoor shooting of firearms dangerous to the inhabitants.
And 41 of 62 lots have signed the petition.
Yes, sir.
Any additional questions for the staff? This public hearing is now open. Mrs. Shiraki, has anyone signed up?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Joe Andrews.
Mr. Andrews, you're like all over the place.
Yeah, man, got a lot of concerns about government overreach. We already have laws for this. There's laws about hunting within certain distances of occupied dwellings. There's reckless endangerment laws with firearms. We don't need another one. Here's the problem. You got 40 sub-signatures out of 60 people. What about those other 20 people? What if they want to shoot a raccoon that's in their trash can? And they can do it safely with a small caliber handgun with rat shot in it or something. Now we're gonna have, what we're gonna do here is we're gonna open up a can of worms where neighbor one can call the police on neighbor two. And just because he discharged a firearm, even though he did it safely, he can go to jail. Possibly lose his firearms, possibly lose his right to have a firearm. This is a slippery slope. And we're getting ready to hear about it in other communities in this county in coming months and weeks. And that's why I'm here to talk about it tonight, because this needs to be stopped right now and right here. I'll be back for the next one, too.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak, Mrs. Shiraki?
No one else has signed up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Could I get your name and address when you get up to the podium, please?
Scott Simmons, 76 Eldridge Drive, Front Royal. I'm here tonight to urge the board to approve the petition to ban the discharge of firearms in Dungatton Subdivision. Some of the numbers that you gave, there are 44 property owners in Dungatton. Some of them own multiple lots. Out of the 44 property owners, 31 have signed, which equates to about 71%. And the reason some of them haven't signed is they are landlords and don't know where they might be. Homes are close, 200 to 300 feet on average. In most cases, in any direction, there is a home or street with children playing. And in addition to safety, the noise factor is another issue. One example is that a neighbor was having a birthday party for his 4-year-old daughter. Once the shooting started, she became scared, went back in the house, and would not return to her party. When the offender was asked to stop, his reply was, "I am in the county. I will shoot when I want." I urge you to pass this ban. Thank you.
I don't know the answer to this. Is there a homeowners association in Dungatton?
Yes, it is. We're not a homeowners association.
But you do have a group of members that you communicate with on a regular basis?
Correct.
And is everybody involved in that? All of the community? Or is everybody invited to visit and talk about anything that they want to? Yes?
This is the president right here.
Okay. Ma'am, could you come up for me just a minute? Hi. And your name and address, please?
Dana Fogel, and I live at 510 Dungatton Road.
Thank you, Dana, for coming up. I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
I know that there's a concern over the firearms being shot in the area.
Yes, it is.
Have you had a public group get together of all of the people in the community and try to sit down and talk with the other members and say, look, my grandkid's going to have a birthday party on Saturday. Would you please not shoot?
The people that are shooting, that's almost impossible to have conversations with them. They're younger. It's a younger generation. One of them has been in trouble with the law for a very long time. So, and they've had the law called on them multiple times up there for different things that have been going on. So really, you cannot talk to them. The mother is the one that owns the house, and she lives in Norfolk. So that's kind of out of the question about talking.
Okay.
We just have one entity that's caused this whole issue.
Have you called the sheriff?
Yes, they've been called multiple times to go up there.
Have they actually come, and have they visited that particular person?
They have come up there. Whether they have visited that person or not, I have no idea.
Have you, I suggest that you ask for a record or a incident report that they actually went and visited that particular person? Because if they can't find him, or if they are going anyplace to look into this thing and they're not hearing shooting and they can't find him, they may not have done a report. I think you should be asking for the report.
Well, they should be writing a report anyway, saying that they went to a call, even though that they,
You are absolutely correct.
yes.
I mean, we want to make sure that they're doing their job, and they're doing their, I'm not going to say their job's big. But
Correct.
doing their due diligence to help solve that problem.
But the houses are way too close for all of this. It is very dangerous because they are shooting across a road, and that is illegal to do also. When they're called, I don't know if they drive right to the house, but if they would just sit and listen out on Dungadin Road, they could hear them shooting. If they would sit and listen on the back road, they would hear them shooting, and then could go to the home.
Have you reached your limit?
As far as what?
Have you reached your limit as far as you can't solve this problem on a local level, so you're asking the Board of Supervisors to solve it for you?
Correct, because the neighbors that are around that house, they're wanting to sell their homes to move out because it's so dangerous.
So this is not an issue of a nuisance with noise. This is a fear for your safety. Okay. And as far as other, nobody here is against people, gun ownership. It's just a simple safety and fear for life and limb.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Correct.
I don't think I have any more questions. Thank you very much for coming up.
You're welcome.
Yeah, your comments heard. I'm perfectly happy with it, understanding that you would like it to be carried. I understand that. I mean, you are welcome to say it, but I just don't think it would be necessary. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Ryan Messenger. I live at 363 Wendy Hill Road, which is part of Shenandoah Farms. We recently had a shooting ban added to our community, and personally was against it and was unaware of it being done. Didn't see it coming up on an agenda, which it was, but didn't know, so didn't speak out then, and I figured I'd speak here. I want to agree with Joe Andrews that I don't believe this is going to solve the problem. If the gun owner is, or the person who's shooting is already shooting across a road, as was said, they're already breaking the law. And adding another law is not going to fix that. Enforcement is. So if they're currently not shooting safely and breaking the law and doing so, that needs to be enforced, not add other laws restricting other homeowners or possibly future homeowners. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this issue? Yes, ma'am. And we'll get your name and address, please.
Sarah Saber, and I'm at 90 Reed Drive, Front Royal. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but I as well am part of a subdivision that passed a shooting ban seemingly behind closed doors with no notice. I'm sure it was posted, but what I find to be a little bit difficult is when we are not able to, either be at the meeting, so they're at 7 p.m. I work an hour away. I can't always get here on time. I don't always know about them. And what this sounds like is it sounds like there's one particular neighbor, and this is a witch hunt to get shooting banned to shut the neighbor up. Seems like it's a younger individual who lives in a house owned by his mom, possibly. She doesn't live here. In my subdivision, there was an individual who came here and spoke to push the shooting ban through. And my concern is that that kind of a survey can be extremely misleading. As mentioned, certain individuals can sign it. They could own multiple lots. But also, I think it's important to hear from the actual property owners and the full-time residents. I own my property, but if I rented it full-time to somebody, I would want their opinion to be considered as well, because it's whoever's actually living there. But most importantly, I feel like this is a neighbor issue, and I feel like certain people might be under the opinion that they can't just go knock on their neighbor's door. Well, maybe they can't. Maybe the sheriff needs to go hold their hand and knock on the door with them, but ultimately that's not for the Board of Supervisors to say yes or no. That's something that the neighbors need to decide, and if it's a safety issue, backstops are pretty good. You can get a 50-foot one. That's what they use in indoor shooting ranges, so it doesn't really matter how small the lots are. You can discharge a firearm safely in a very, very small portion of land, but that's all I have to say.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Yes? We're going to be short and sweet, huh?
Okay, rebuttal, Noel Williams from 419. I don't live where you live, but there are raccoon traps at Road King. They can stop the animals. You all need to vote and help these people out. That person needs to be arrested. I don't know, gun violence, I'm against it. Violence with guns. I worked at Kmart at the sporting goods. Those gun owners were responsible. This person isn't. Get them off the street. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Right after this. Go ahead, ma'am.
My name's Colleen Call. I live in Dungadin at 36 Brent Lane. There's an understanding here that there's only one neighbor that is doing this. There's more than one. They are on lots less than 1 acre, and they are reckless with their discharge of firearms. They're putting other neighbors' lives and actually mental health in
Take a breath, please.
in danger. I have a neighbor who doesn't wish to speak, but she is actually afraid to go outside in her yard because of this. And I just want it understood that this is not against gun ownership. I own guns, I shoot guns, and I do it in a safe way. I really appreciate your listening to us and appreciate your consideration in this matter. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm at Roger Smith, 64 Terra Road, Front Royal, Virginia. What exactly is Section 177-3? Can somebody tell us that? Because I'm sure it doesn't just address recreational shooting, does it? Just recreational shooting.
Mr. Daly, do you have an answer for that, please?
This is an ordinance that provides all the shooting prohibited in designated locations, and it lists the specific subdivisions that have petitioned the board at various times to prohibit the discharge of firearms. There are signs erected, and it redefines the firearms, and then The other part of the section just has simply the shooting, discharging of firearms.
So that's any discharge of a firearm, not just during
The subdivision,
recreational.
sir.
So this would prohibit you from protecting yourself?
No.
No.
If you discharge your firearm, are you violating 177.3? That's what I'm asking. So,
Would you, that would be, I cannot imagine that you would be criminally charged with that.
I understand that.
I'm not the prosecutor, but that would boggle my mind that would
I
happen.
agree
yes.
also in Warren County to today. We have enough people that I think that would protect that from happening, but
At the end of the day, the jury is what protects that from happening, so.
that's correct. Okay, that was my question.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Mr. Gabbert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Gabbert, 1221 Valley View.
Excuse me just a second, Paul. Could we get a little quiet in the audience, please? Thank you.
I don't envy the position that you all are put in sometimes. Some of the things you're asked to judge and be the jury, sometimes I think I'm going to come up here when me and my wife get into a fight and have you decide who's right and who's wrong. But I don't get it when in a subdivision where there's not a lot of land, the lots are small. I don't get it when people can't give up their shooting when there's children playing around. To me, I just don't get it. I think safety would be your number one thing rather than go out in your backyard and shoot a gun. Shooting across the street is illegal. Are the police going to catch you doing it? No. You shoot across the street and shoot a kid. That's illegal. Are they going to catch who did it? Maybe, maybe not. I don't understand the safety value of things these days that it's my right. It's my right to fire a gun. It's my right to carry a gun. I don't own guns. I lost a brother-in-law to a gun. I've lost friends to a gun. I lost friends that didn't come back from Vietnam to guns. And sometimes I don't get it with, not to be judgmental, but gun owners. It's like the whole thing is about their gun, about being able to hold their gun in their hand and shoot it. Forget the people who are around you, playing in the street, playing in the yard. Forget those people. Just give me my gun, let me shoot it. Thank you. I hope you all vote the right way.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Darrell Lusky. I live at 146 Lookout Point Way. My background, I got a little bit of expertise in this. I was a deputy sheriff in El Paso County where I was got the expert marksmanship awards. I was in the military 21 years. I was a gun, or actually what's called a CADM, which is a weapons instructor for the Air Force Academy. Been in Iraq. So I've been around guns all my life. I'm a Second Amendment holder. I own my own guns. But safety is the prime factor. If you go ahead and allow people to go ahead and, in fact, Mr. Fox, I think you heard my spiel last year. But if you allow people to go ahead and shoot in an unsafe manner, if you look at what the federal government requires for a safety range, there's an 8-foot berm around it. What you got problems are, you got ricochets. Somebody goes ahead and shoots, they hit the rock, it ricochets off. It can go in any direction. Mr. Messenger, I think it was over here, mentioned that, well, they're using small arms. What's going to stop them there? Have you ever looked at the box of 22? The 22 on the side of the box says it's got a range of 1.5 miles. The 22 is basically your smallest round out there. So you can go ahead and shoot that. It can hit a tree, ricochet off, and it can still go 1.5 miles. This is not anything about the Second Amendment rights. This is not anything about your rights, period. This is the right of safety, which is in your Constitution, freedom. This has not has anything to do. They can still go to the range and shoot. They can shoot in a safe area. Most states, not most states, but there are a few states like Missouri, Texas, require you have a minimum of 5 acres before you can shoot. Some are actually 10. The reason behind that is because that velocity of that round. Even a pistol, 38, that will go over 400 yards. Might not be accurate, but it's so the velocity goes over. You're looking at a velocity of a weapon that's getting the carriage is holding a charge in that weapon, that powder. And when that goes off, it goes off. You can't control it. There is, if you go on, you can go YouTube, you can go on Google. You look out there and you look at weapons accidents on firing range. These are experts. These are professionals. These are law enforcement experts. Then they still get accidents. So if you got a lot that's less than less than an acre, it's not if something's going to happen, it's going to be when something happens. And it will happen. We've already had here in Warren County, we had a lady last year, somebody shot her in the neck. I think somebody here has told me about a ricochet or shrapnel hit a kid lately here in Warren County. This is something that, like these guys say, it's got to be stopped. You say, well, it's a slippery slope. It's also a slippery slope if you let it go forward and somebody gets hurt. Do you want this on your conscience? I don't want it on mine. I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't belong to the subdivision. But I do believe in the safety of the people of Warren County. And like I said, I personally, I hunt, I shoot, but I do it safely. I go out to a place I have a friend that's got 50 acres. You can join the Isaac Walton League here. They got firing ranges down there in Berryville. There's plenty of places that are safely fitted where you go shooting. You don't have to worry about the ricochets. When we had one for Shenandoah Farms, we had people come up here. One they got shot in their pool. Another one had shot through their window. Other ones, they found people shooting around, shooting and hitting his pool, inside his pool. I mean, this is not safe. So when they keep saying it's my Second Amendment rights, it's a slippery slope. Your Second Amendment rights says you have the right to bear arms. It does not say you have the right to shoot in an unsafe environment. Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? If no one else would like to speak, we would consider this public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
I move that the Board of Supervisors approve the attached ordinance to amend Section 177-3 of the Warren County Code to add the Dungadin subdivision to the list of designated locations where the recreational shooting of firearms is prohibited.
Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to second this, and I'd like to make note that 41 of the 62 lots have signed the petition supporting this request.
Any additional discussion? Mrs. Shiraki, could we get a vote, please?
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Thank you. The next agenda on the public hearing is for the Conditional Use Permit 2019-11-2, Asa and Andres Voss for short-term tourist rental. Mrs. Logan?
The applicants are requesting a conditional use permit for a short-term tourist rental for their single-family dwelling. The property is located in Timberland Manor Estates in the South River Magisterial District, and it is approximately 6.97 acres. The property would be managed by a caretaker who resides locally. There is a property management plan in your packet, along with a detailed staff report and comment letters from various agencies. The applicant does have a sewage disposal system operation permit for a 4-bedroom home with 8-person occupancy. The dwelling does meet the setback requirements to all adjacent dwellings. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this CUP with 4 conditions, which are listed in the staff report. The minutes of their meetings are in your packet as well. The public hearing has been properly advertised, and all adjacent property owners have been notified, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Are there any questions from the staff? This public hearing is now open. Mrs. Shiraki, has anyone signed up?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. David Reed?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is David Reed. My business address, 16 South Court Street, Luray, Virginia. I'm an attorney, and I represent the Lees, who are the adjoining property owners to the Foss property here. What we have here is a request in an agricultural zone district, which I asked the board to review the zoning regulations related to that district. Those are in your code 180-21. I would note that the statement of the intent for this particular zoning district is for low-density residential developments, and that this permitted use is actually not by right, but rather by conditional use permit. So going on, when you look at your conditional use zoning code section, which is under 180-63, the Board of Supervisors under Section A2 indicates that they may approve a conditional use permit if the provisions of the article, when it's concluded that it complies with all specified standards, that such use will be compatible with existing or planned development in the general area. That's the statement of intent right from your code section there for conditional use approval. That does continue on to say that if it does meet those requirements, that you can enact certain restrictions and conditions on such a permit. My clients here who own the adjoining property that has a residence on it where they reside, it's the closest residence to this proposed special use and conditional use permit for a short-term rental. I understand from my clients as well as others in the neighborhood that there are no other permits in place in this subdivision for a short-term rental that's being proposed. And my clients oppose this, and they did so at the prior meetings, and they've submitted comments as well. What I would say is whenever you're considering this request, that if you have a conditional use, it's often called a special use, something that goes beyond the code, beyond the zoned uses here. And whenever you're doing that, you have to consider the impact on the neighborhood. And here, my clients feel it would be severe to both their property as well as the adjoining properties and others in the subdivision, as well as opening the door for other possibilities in the future. This is a low-density residential area. It has very nice homes in it. No one else is doing this use, and in fact, your code allows only under a special type use or conditional use permit. I did have the opportunity to review the application. I've followed this for quite some time now. Your staff's been very kind and cooperative in keeping me informed of the process and any updates. I did have the opportunity to give the caretaker, the proposed local caretaker, a call today in the number that was listed in the application. I did not receive a return call yet that person's supposed to be someone who can immediately respond to concerns related to this. I simply wanted to have a conversation to understand if he was able to do that. While there's a setback requirement has been met per your code related to the special use, conditional use permits here, I would also note that my clients recently constructed a fence, in fact, at their expense along a property line here to prevent some encroachments that were occurring on this adjoining property that's proposed to use. So whenever you're considering these, and particularly this one today, I think you also have to look and consider at who is proposing it, how it's being proposed, and how it's going to be managed. Because someone who lives day to day at a residence has a certain vested interest. It's their home. They want to enjoy their home in certain ways. If you have a neighbor who lives full-time or even part-time in that property, they have a similar vested interest to you. Whenever they lease out that home and they're not living in that home or not close by to manage that, it can create a situation very quickly where adjoining neighbors are not able to communicate effectively with those tenants, particularly here a short-term type tenant, nor do those tenants are informed of the nature and the concerns of the neighborhood or other surrounding uses and residents. And here we have a landowner that, while is indicates in their application that they intend to use it part-time for their own recreation and residence, as they've been doing for a little time now. They also indicate that they'll be absentee whenever it is being proposed to be rented. So that brings a concern as well with who can address the issues that are brought up in a short-term scenario like this, where you have someone coming in, renting it for a weekend or a week. Is it appropriate for your neighbor to have to go to those renters and have that conversation where you don't have a vested interest from the owner in it? Also, I'd note that in the subdivision covenants and restrictions, while those are different and separate and distinct from your zoning code, they run in conjunction with, at least in parallel to, zoning code. It does limit the uses to single-family residences within the subdivision. My clients would suggest that this goes beyond that, in that while it is not a single-family home at that point, it becomes at least edging towards the commercial use requirement. In fact, it's taxed as such by the county, and a revenue is generated in that regard. So I would ask that when the proposal comes up today, that you all consider denying this request for the reasons I've stated, and that you give serious consideration, if you do consider approving it, to putting contingencies and restrictions on any permit that you issue that can be directly enforced easily by your staff and the local authorities and understood by any neighbor if you choose to go in that direction. What's being proposed at this point does not rise to that level of those types of restrictions, and therefore in this neighborhood, in my opinion, is not appropriate. And we ask you to deny the request.
Mrs. Sharkey, has anyone else signed up?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Suzanne Savage.
Now, don't you all get mad at me. I'm speaking for 8 other people in addition to myself.
Ma'am?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
All right.
your
My name
name
is
and-
Suzanne Savage. I live at 33 Timberland Manor Drive. And I am here to speak on behalf of 8 other individuals, in addition to myself, who were too concerned about their own health to be in an enclosed area for this meeting. Mrs. Cullors, Cheryl is our representative for the South River District, and I have sent her 3 emails. The first I sent on July 31st. We found out that the Fosses were going to reapply for a permit, and wrote that I was frankly appalled that we were even considering such a thing with the COVID-19 issue going on. First of all, the reason none of these people are coming is we're old folks. There are very few young people in that neighborhood. The Fosses are. Asa's 40. All right, I'm a youngin' at 68. We're not a young group, and so we have pre-existing conditions. I have several, but I'm hardier, and I was willing to come and defend all of these people's positions. Whatever the case, that was my first letter to her, and she did respond promptly that the Fosses are allowed due process, and so we're going to have the meeting. Fine. I sent her a second email asking if we would be allowed rebuttals, because during the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on the 12th of February, Mr. Foss made 2 statements which I absolutely knew to be untrue. And so I stood up and said, am I allowed to speak? And of course, the chair said, no, you may not. So I emailed her and said I was not allowed to rebut at the February 12th meeting. Will I be allowed to rebut if I find, since Mr. Foss gets to speak last, will I be allowed to rebut? And she did say that yes, I could do so. And having heard the previous discussions,
Ma'am,
I
would
think,
you talk to the board,
okay,
please? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but having heard the previous meetings in here, I know that people can rebut, so I'm happy about that. The third thing I gave her was a video from the Front Royal Examiner of that meeting, because I said I would be alluding to it, addressing the concerns of all of the people that are not here. So let me get to that next, and as I say, I'll go as fast as I can. I have 30 pages of requests and so on from people, so I will try to condense them. All right, when we spoke at that meeting, and when we spoke at Samuel's library, which was a meeting before we had the planning and zoning, everybody talked about security. And that is because we are off the beaten path, 32 lots with only 27 people living there, and you got to know about it to find it. And I bought the place in 2017, and the other people mentioned why they bought it. We want privacy. We've retired here. We want security, and we feel safe. We don't have a neighborhood watch, but everybody talks. Our mailbox, which unfortunately is in front of the Foss's house, which I walk to and from almost every day, that used to be our water cooler, and we'd hang out and talk. Now with COVID-19, we don't do that. We stand in the street with our face masks on and talk, but that in and of itself has hampered the community. But the other security issues that people mentioned, they said that people come in, and we are very big lots. Mine's 9.5, the Lee's is 11.5, and so the lots of that size are now, the Fosses are 6 point something, but that's a small lot where we live. You can't see my house from the street. If I didn't have a security system and a parrot, that if he gets scared, you can hear him in Topeka, Kansas. So she's met him. I've got a security system. But whatever the case, you can rob us blind because nobody can see our homes. That's a concern. And somebody with bad behavior in mind can go to that place, discover, wow, look at this neighborhood, and they can come in. And they don't even have to come in at that time. They can come at a later date. And don't say, Mr. Foss stated in his presentation, we're the first house leading into Timberland Manor Estates. So these people will come, and then they'll just exit. And I've come here, and there's such a steep hill a few houses back from mine that nobody's going to go back there. We've never gone back there because of the sharp barrier. This is a direct quote if you did preview that video. Please, that hill begins at the end of my driveway, and my driveway's steeper than that hill. The Lee's Highway driveway takes an Olympian to climb up and down it. So that hill is not a barrier to anyone that wants to go into the neighborhood and do whatever. Let me mention something else. I used to be secretary until the end of January, and so I was in on all events through the officers, what am I trying to say, our website, and so that you could contact us. And Ed, the president, who is not here tonight, Ed, the president, in broad daylight, he and the family were away, somebody came to their house and stole a truck's load worth of firewood and left with it. And so he complained on the website, and I immediately got on and went, do you have a security system? And he said, no. And so we, of course, talked about, you got to get a security system, you got to get heat and motion sensors, et cetera, to protect your house around here. And he agreed, he agreed. My next door neighbor on the other side, who has enough security, Fort Knox couldn't be up with him, got on and said, oh, by the way, we came home one afternoon, and he's got a little baby. He and his wife and the baby came home, and there is a man passed out, and he came in there to do drugs, and he passed out after doing the drugs, and his car got stuck on the top of the propane tank. And so they came home, and there he is, dead at the wheel, and they called security, the police, whatever, and they came and they took him away. It is a security risk. Why advertise it? So that was an issue with everyone. Another concern, of course.
Could I interrupt just a second?
Yes.
You're running way past your time. We've got about 3 to 5 minutes per person.
Okay, so even if I represent 8 people, I'm not allowed to say anything else?
Ma'am, I'm sorry. We're giving each individual as much time as we can.
And you're giving 8 individuals my amount of time?
No, ma'am, I understand that you represent 8 individuals.
Thank you very much.
And we will accept that. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak, Emily?
Yes, the applicant, Mr. Foss.
Hi there, I'll keep this very brief. I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a homeowner. I would like to say that the caretaker did receive a call, he texted me about it, he called back, but the lawyer left an incorrect phone number, so he didn't reach him. So just wanted to bring that up. We are planning on spending a lot of time with this property. We've spent many months here, you know, especially because of COVID. It's been a really amazing escape for us. We are not going to be absentee at all. This is just an occasional rental that we'd like to have the opportunity to do. And just like to thank the Planning Commission for providing really good feedback to us and telling us exactly what we need to do and the steps to jump through. And just, yeah, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Is there anyone else, Emily, that would like to speak?
Not signed up, Mr. Chairman.
Is there anyone that would like to speak? Ma'am, I understand what you're trying to say, and I appreciate it, and I understand that you represented 8 people, and we got that.
Now, my only concern is I have several other things to point out against having it in our community, and I can't say them. And so I hope you consider the age of the people, the security risks when you make this decision. That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. If there is no one else in the audience that would like to speak, final call. This public hearing is now closed. What is the pleasure of the board? Do we have a motion?
Could I ask Mr. Foss a question?
Yes, ma'am, you can.
Mr. Foss, you stated that your caretaker got a phone call and realized it was from the lawyer, but it was a wrong number. Was that the only, he didn't try to look him up in the phone book? He knew it was a lawyer, but I'm kind of confused as...
He mentioned that he had just received a phone call from a lawyer about the property and wanted to know if he was my lawyer. I said no. He said, okay. I tried calling him back, and there wasn't the correct number. That was this afternoon around 3 o'clock. So there wasn't a whole lot of time between when he received the call and now.
Can I ask if that was on a cell phone or a home phone?
I don't know.
Ma'am, if you,
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
the person who made that call, I'd be glad to try and answer your questions related to that.
Okay, I'm just one of, my concern is if, you have a caretaker that it's not going to be readily available to whoever calls. If they call you and then, it's a long, if there's something of concern going on, and this is a long process to address that, and it seems like at
Absolutely.
this time, at least it was, so.
He has always been readily available to me. I always will be and am readily available via cell phone as well. Anytime I send him a message, I tend to get a text back within, if not seconds, then minutes. He's very responsive. So I have no concerns about that whatsoever.
Do we have a motion now?
Did you want to say anything to address that, since you?
So I made that call, oftentimes, absolutely, sir. Oftentimes when our main line comes through, it comes through on our 7435119 number, and then each attorney we have direct dial numbers, and that was provided twice. Every time I leave my name and number for someone, I provide it twice and repeat it. So I'm not sure if there was confusion over the main line number being from the call-in and then being left a direct dial number. Either way, my office is readily available on the internet, and my phone number for the main line is out there as well. So
Okay, thank you.
shouldn't be any question being able to reach me.
I'm going to make a motion that I move the Board of Supervisors deny the conditional use permit of Asa and Andrea Foss for short-term rental. And my reason is I don't feel like you've got that under control yet. And being that you're not there, I would feel more comfortable knowing that you have someone that is going to be readily available, with the understanding that I have of the residents there, that would be a big issue and concern. And I don't see moving this forward when I see that going as a major issue of neighborliness and having this thing go smoothly.
Do we have a second?
I will second that motion.
Emily, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye. Next item on the agenda is the Conditional Use Permit 2019-06-01. Robert and Colleen Heckens, I am sorry if I mispronounced that, for a private school. Mrs. Logan?
The applicants are requesting a conditional use permit for a private school. They are requesting to open a private Montessori school at their residence located at 1694 East Refuge Church Road. They are proposing to house the school in their detached 4,400 square foot barn on the property. They plan to have approximately 60 students and 5 staff occupy that space. The acreage is 15 acres and located in the North River District. You do have agency comments from building inspections and Health Department and VDOT in your packets. The Health Department did have comments that the facility must be connected to an approved sewage system, and the well is required to be an approved water supply by the Office of Drinking Water. And the building inspections, the building official and I went out to the property, and the applicants were provided comments on what it would take to bring the barn up to building code standards for the private school. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of the application with 5 conditions, and the public hearing was properly advertised, and all adjacent property owners have been notified.
Do we have any questions for Mrs. Logan? Mrs. Logan, do you know how many students have actually agreed to be a member of this Montessori school? Probably doesn't matter yet, but.
Well, you could probably ask the applicant. I only know they're requesting the 60.
Okay.
And then the 5 staff.
Will we get the opportunity to talk to the applicant tonight?
I believe he should be here.
Okay.
I have not
Is
looked
the
at the whole
applicant here?
crowd.
I don't see him.
He was notified of the public hearing, and like I said, we've conducted site visits to the property. He did, in our last site visit to the property, he did say that for the fall, they do have another place to have the school. So this would be, he wanted to go forward with the permit still, but that there is obviously a lot to do to bring the property up to code standards. So that this would be for future, but.
Okay. That was my next question. We're looking for future, a fair ways down the road, not
Yes,
just
sir,
an immediate
not
thing.
next month.
Okay, not next month. Okay, thank you very much. And your motion was you suggested approval for this, correct?
Well, the Planning Commission recommended approval.
Yes, understood. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I have a couple of questions, if you will, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman. This this school that's going to be installed, that was in a barn. The building itself was a barn that's being converted to a schoolhouse. Is that what we're?
It is a barn. I put a picture of it. So they originally built it as so I say barn, but it was originally built as a special events facility. Basically, they built it to have kind of like barn weddings out of. It's very nice. It's not insulated, which it would need to be. And it does have, other access issues that would have to be addressed. I mean, there are building code issues, but that could be addressed because it is a well-built structure.
Would it, the electrical have to be brought up to standards of commercial use rather than residential or farm?
Well, I think all the electric was installed and inspected, I believe. I remember, everything would need permits and would be inspected by Building Inspections Department. But the
And-
way that the structure was built, it was engineered.
And how about your septic system? Was that looked at by the health department and approved?
So the septic system, they only have a septic system for the home. So they would need a septic system for
They would have to
this.
install a septic system?
Yes, sir. They're having trouble with the soil work because the soils aren't great there.
And how about the well? Was the well built to commercial standards, or was it to agriculture? There's agriculture, residential, and commercial. And was this, what type well was that installed?
So they would need a well to be installed for the barn.
They would have to install a well
And
also.
it would have
Is that as per the health department? Is that?
Yes, sir.
That right?
Yes, sir, but it would actually have to be inspected by the Office of Drinking Water because it's serving more than 25 people.
Okay.
So it would be to that higher standard.
So there's no part that you know of that's being circumvented in any way, and all of this would have to be brought up to standards.
Yeah, there's a
for
lot to
commercial
be
use.
done.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And the applicants are aware of that, and it's a church organization, so I think they're just going to decide, whether they do want to invest all of it here or they will find an alternate location, but.
Okay, and then the surrounding area, the parking area, and all of that would have to be brought up to commercial standards.
Yes, sir, they do have a good parking space.
Okay.
I think Ms. Colors has been on a site visit, and there is a lot of room there. The main thing to staff and the planning commission was the well and septic.
And would a commercial entrance have to be installed as well?
Yes, sir.
Is that
They
correct?
got approval from VDOT, and they have engineered plans. They did go forward with their engineered plans for a commercial entrance.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you right now.
If I remember correctly, they can't do any of those things until we pass a conditional use. So we have to do this in order for them to do all the things that have been listed. And if they don't, then this is null and void, correct?
Yes, ma'am. We usually don't require anyone to put in a well or septic prior to a permit being approved because we don't want them to invest in something that may not ultimately even be approved. So this would be the first step. And then they would have to do all the health department requirements, building inspections, VDOT, all agencies.
So our concerns would be addressed before
They could get any kind of.
permit would
yes,
be
sir.
granted. Okay, I'm fine.
Thank you. If there are no additional questions from the staff, the public hearing is now open. Mrs. Shirashi, has anyone signed up?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? If there's no one in the audience that would like to speak, this public hearing is now closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Supervisors approve the conditional use permit request of Robert and Colin Hecken for a private school with conditions recommended by the Planning Commission.
Second.
Any additional questions or comments? Mrs. Shiraki, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Colors?
Aye.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next on the agenda is the public hearing for the conditional use permit 2020-07-01, Anthony Capart for short-term tourist rental. Mr. Wilding?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, these properties are identified on tax map 15E, section 6, block 6. It's parcels 735 and 736, and located at 437 Jones Quadrangle Road in the Shenandoah Farms Mountain Lake subdivision. They are not in the flood zone. Mr. Cappert's statement of justification and request for a use as a short-term tourist rental was provided in your packets, and this application has been forwarded by the Planning Commission with a recommendation for approval with the conditions listed in the staff report and agenda item. In brief, Condition 1 identifies the property as a two-bedroom dwelling and allows for no more than 4-person occupancy. Condition number 2 is a standard condition requiring an annual water quality test report. And condition number 3 states that the drainage swale at the driveway entrance to the property shall be maintained as needed to allow proper drainage of stormwater and safe access to the property. This public hearing has been properly advertised, and adjacent property owners have been notified. I do believe the property owner is here. I spoke to him today, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have at this time.
Does the staff have any questions? Is there no questions from the staff? The public hearing is now open. Mrs. Shiraki, has anyone signed up?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant, Mr. Capert.
Mr. Caper? Didn't mean to make you run all over.
First, I just want to say thanks again for Matt, for your help, for helping to put this application together over the past few months. And just in general, I'll reiterate what I put in the packet, which is we've been coming out to this area and hiking in the mountains, Shenandoah, and enjoying breweries and wineries, my wife and I and our kids, for years. And we decided to buy a little place out here to enjoy for us and our kids, but also to rent it when we're not using it, to offset the mortgage, and maybe we make a little bit of money as well. But the goal is to use it and rent it when we're not there. Had a chance to meet and chat with the POA president, Ralph, met with the neighbors across the street, next door. Most of the neighbors have been really friendly and helpful, and we're looking to just, get plugged into that community, and have been already. Made a lot of repairs to the house, new septic, redid the floors, really tried to turn this into a nice place for us, but also for anyone who want to use it. So happy to answer any questions, but we're just excited to move forward, again, with our own house, but also, using it as a rental when we're not there. That's all. Thank you.
Mrs. Shiraki, anyone else signed up?
No one else has signed up.
Do we have a motion from the board, please? Oh, excuse me. If no one else would like to speak, this public hearing is now closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Supervisors approve the conditional use permit request of Anthony Capart for a short-term tourist rental with the conditions as recommended by the Planning Commission and staff.
Is there a second?
Do you mind if I ask one question before?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Do you have someone who's going to oversee this, or to be your property manager?
Yeah, you said who's going to be overseeing it?
Right.
Met a really great woman, Christina Carter. Actually saw she and her husband today, caught up, and we're doing some work in the house. She's a local handyman and cleaner. She cleans a bunch of local homes for folks, but also folks who rent their home in Warren County and the surrounding area.
And she's very local to the house.
Yeah, she is. She lives in town. She's about 15 minutes from the house itself, but she's very super responsive. She was up there today. Replies to text calls, and she's aware that I'm looking to her not just as a cleaner, but as the property manager, right? She's the person who, if there's ever an issue, she'll be there in person. Of course, my cell phone is always with the guests as well, and if there's something at 3 a.m, it's ultimately on me. But she's been a really great resource so far, and I think she'll be great long term.
I just wanted to make sure. I didn't see that in here. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Excuse me, Ms. Cullors, we'll make sure that her number is in the property management plan
Okay.
for the use.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
With that, then I'll second that.
Mrs. Shiraki, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye. That is approved. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is the public hearing for the conditional use permit 2020-07-02, Robert Hensley for private use camping. Mr. Petty.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit for private use camping on a vacant lot in the Rivermont Acre Subdivision. This area is located in the special flood hazard area. Mr. Hensley's family, they've owned this property for many years now, and they have been using it for camping in the past. So In speaking with him, they came in for an electrical permit to hook up the existing electrical on the property. And when we notified him that a CUP is required in these districts, he has complied. He drove down from Maryland the next day to make sure he was applied and got it in compliance with the county code. These are our standard conditions, as you'll see in the packet. I'll be happy to answer any questions. It has been properly advertised. Joining property owners have been notified.
And we're sure that this is non-commercial.
Yes, this is for his family only. There are multiple lots on this Rivermont Acres that are used by the families that use it for their own personal use. That's correct. And we do have an existing private use camping permit already down in this neighborhood as well.
Any additional questions from the?
I'd just like to make note, it's zoned residential.
Yes, sir. These properties are still zoned residential 1.
Because there was some industrial purposes out there at one time, I think, along down that riverside.
Any additional comments or questions from the board here? If no other questions, this public hearing is now open. Mrs. Shiraki, has anyone signed up?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Was anyone like to speak on this particular piece of agenda? As no one would like to speak, this public hearing is now closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Supervisors approve the conditional use permit request of Ralph Hensley for private use camping with conditions as recommended by the Planning Commission and staff.
Second.
Mrs. Shiraki, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Chairman?
Aye?
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the hearing for the conditional use permit 2020-07-03. Aaron Hike for private use camping. Mr. Wielding.
Yes, sir. The property is identified on tax map 21B, section 1, block 1 as parcel U and is located in the Mcguest subdivision. Portions of this property are located in the special flood hazard area, and the property is approximately 0.36 acres and is accessed by Beckwith Drive. Mr. Hike's statement of justification and request for the private use non-commercial camping has been included in your packets, and the application has been forwarded by the Planning Commission with a recommendation for approval with the standard conditions. These conditions are relating to health department regulation, material storage, having an emergency egress plan, and posting of a lot number for fire and rescue and EMS, and are listed in the staff report and agenda item. This public hearing has been properly advertised, and adjacent property owners have been notified. The applicant is here. Oh, I believe he's here. Well, I did notify him, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have at this time.
Any questions from the board? And we're sure also that this is non-commercial.
Yeah, it's absolutely non-commercial. Mr. Hike does own a property behind this, and he actually has expressed an intent to develop that property and put a home on it and apply for a short-term tourist rental. But this particular use is solely for non-commercial private use camping, which would allow them to bring campers on the property.
Thank you. If there are no additional questions from the board, this public hearing is now open. Mrs. Shiraki, has anyone signed up?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Joe Andrews?
Joe Andrews, 735 Mcguest Farm Lane again. I'm familiar with this property. I own property near it. What this is it was an existing home, probably vacation use at some time, that was lost during the floods of 95 or something. The main structure is still there. It was my understanding that Mr. Hike was going to rebuild that structure. Perhaps I'm wrong, unless we're talking about a different piece of property. But on Beckwith Drive is a goat path and not much more, and a dead-end goat path. So I don't understand where camping would even be possible, because you could barely turn a pickup truck around in the area where we're talking about allowing a camper. So although I'm not opposed to Mr. Hike being in the neighborhood and improving his property and bringing up the tax values of all of our surrounding properties, I don't think it meets the qualification for any sort of camping by any stretch of the imagination. So I'd be opposed to that, but I'd certainly be in favor of him getting permits and rebuilding that structure that's been dilapidated for, 15 or more years.
Mr. Shiraki, has anyone else signed up?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Bear with me for just a second, looking at something. With no one else having signed up, is there anyone else that would like to speak at all on this piece of agenda? If there was no one else that would like to speak, final call. This public hearing is now closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
May I address Mr. Andrews' concern regarding the private use camping?
Yes, sir, you may.
Another portion of our code, the floodplain overlay district, requires that a river lot in the special floodplain, in special flood hazard area, in order to have an accessory structure put on that lot for storage of recreational and maintenance equipment only, not for living, but for storage of recreational equipment only, a private use camping conditional use permit must be issued to establish the principal use as a recreational use, not as a dwelling, but as a recreational use. So just as in a previous conditional use permit that we had come through Mr. Fox down in the South River District, in order for Mr. Hike to get his building permits and rehab this, it's a cinder block structure, and it's in pretty bad shape, pretty rough shape. But his intent is solely to use it just for storage of equipment, of kayaks and canoes, that kind of thing, while he's using the property. Property currently does have a few picnic tables, and I agree, it's pretty tight in there for a camper. But if Mr. Hike wanted to bring a small camper or tents or whatever, that kind of thing, it would allow him to do that and also pull the permits in order to rehab that structure as an accessory structure on a lot in the special flood hazard area. So that ties into Code Section 18016 for our floodplain overlay district.
Okay, question. Looking at this building, he cannot put a cot in here and decide, I'm not going to bring my travel trailer down and spend the weekend in this building, can he? I mean, I guess he can if nobody knows.
Technically he can't, but I'm not going to be there, staff is not
Right.
going to be there to babysit.
No,
He's
myself
basically
either.
got a vested interest in complying with this, okay? If we do get complaints where he is having people come down there and, literally staying or living in that, the accessory structure, which I'm going to call it, then, he basically is in noncompliance. If this gets approved, he'd be in noncompliance and subject to revocation of his permit. Okay, so there's an incentive for him to comply with the permit. Now, if he's fishing on the river and all of a sudden a storm comes up and he has no place to go,
Well,
and maybe he's had it
Well,
might be an adequate place for him to shelter in, right? But
Right.
as far as a dwelling per se, as far as camping, that structure should not be used for that. It's basically for storage of accessory or maintenance equipment for the
Okay.
property.
But he is under that understanding that.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Excuse me. Yes, ma'am.
As we pass this, that he is not
Yes.
supposed to use that as his camping.
I've explained that to him.
And what's the term limit for the conditional use permit?
Dwelling, right?
I'm sorry, Mr.
And what's the time frame? I mean, what is the length for the conditional use permit? Is there a limit?
Are you talking about the camping?
Yeah.
180 calendar days.
180.
That he's allowed, and that would be to have a camper actually on site. and then he would have to pull it off for
And then it has to be removed.
Our primary concern, especially in this area, it would make sense to remove it because it is highly vulnerable.
I'm aware
As
of
Mr. Andrews alluded, the 96 flood took out a whole lot, and I was down there in 2018, and there was quite a bit of debris after those 4 moderate flood events that we had. So, yeah, I think Mr. Hike understands that, you know, he's going to have to be a good owner of the property and understands that anything he puts there is going to have to be roadworthy and be able to pull out at a moment's notice or, you know, for any type of flood event.
Sure.
I think primarily he does, there is a floating dock attached to that property. They have a fire pit, and like I said, they have some picnic tables. I think probably, in all likelihood, he's going to use that primarily for day use, fishing and picnicking and that kind of thing. But he does want to have that structure just available to store items, you know, to secure items there. Canoe, kayak, that kind of thing. So he's not having to bring it down all the time.
Okay, this does not specify explicitly that he cannot use it, but the first sentence that says shall comply with all health department regulations and requirements, I mean, there's nothing here that really says he can't use that structure for a residence.
Yeah. He's not been approved to use it as a residence. His building permit for renovation of it will be, I believe, for an accessory structure.
Okay.
And this conditional use permit would really just allow him to be able to do that. Right now, I believe he has one outstanding electrical permit. He's redone some of the electrical, but the roof on this structure needs some work. And it doesn't quite, when you get into the floodplain and dwellings, you're looking at substantial damage, substantial improvements. I mean, this is an accessory structure in that there's no intent of making it a dwelling.
Okay.
I believe he actually has a porta-john there that he rents seasonally. So, again, it's solely for storage, and Mr. Hike is well aware of that. I've told him a number of times.
What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Supervisors approve the conditional use permit requests of Aaron Hike for private, non-commercial camping with conditions as recommended by the Planning Commission and staff.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Shiraki, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye. That concludes our public hearings. We'd like to ask the indulgence of the community out in front of us for about 10 minutes so we can take a bio break. I know everybody else probably needs one too, so we'll be back as quickly as we can.